Hey everyone, my name is Sean and in today's video I'm going to be playing a little bit of SHADDOLLS. I was recently requested to do an Invoked Shaddoll deck video, and it's a deck which I have yet to learn how to play or build myself, and so I'm currently just working with the main Shaddoll archetype, and this is just me experimenting with this deck here. I haven't got a deck build that I'm very happy with, so this is me testing it out. The Shaddoll deck archetype is kind of interesting, and it has a lot of weaknesses which I'll describe along the way. But what I'm doing now is I'm playing Drag Down into the Grave, one of my anti-hand trap cards, to look at my opponent's hand, see what he's playing and get rid of a card. Now we don't mind this ourselves because all of our Shaddoll monsters have an effect that triggers when they are sent from your hand or deck or field to the graveyard. As long as they're sent to the graveyard by a card effect, they will get their effect, and Squamata has just triggered. Squamata's effect is that when it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, it will send another Shaddoll card from your deck to your graveyard. And that is basically the whole thing with Shadolls. Shadolls are all about being able to send cards to the graveyard in order to get effects. Now, at this point I want to talk a little bit about fusion summoning and its weaknesses as a mechanic. The fusion summon and almost kind of like the ritual summoning mechanic are very, very cost heavy, and they're often not worth the payoff of actually using them. When you do a fusion summon, you need a fusion spell and at least 2 monsters to summon out 1 monster. You are spending 3 cards in order to get 1 monster onto the field, and that's not really good. If the monster was something which is going to be like, hey, you win the game, and it was like an OTK card, fine. It's absolutely worthwhile spending that many resources. But when your card is like Elemental Hero Thunder Giant, which can destroy 1 card in the field, instead of playing 3 cards to summon it to the field, just play Raigeki, Dark Hole, and Mirror Force, and you can blow it. You can just get more out of that by using 3 different cards instead of summoning monsters to the field. But that's the request. That's the archetype we're building here, and so we're playing a little bit of Shadolls. So my opponent is playing Invoked here, which is also a fusion based deck, and I definitely think that the Invoke mechanic is much better than the Shadolls at this point in time. But I'm not playing the Invoked engine within the Shaddoll deck. A lot of people like to play Invoked Shaddoll, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that when I do have a deck profile for this deck, but right now that's not kind of what I'm going for. So we just summoned out Elemental Hero Blazeman, and actually this is what the build is. It's Hero Shaddoll. Now the reason why I'm playing Hero Shaddoll is because heroes are very good at searching out polymerization. They're also monsters of different attributes, which is what your Shaddoll monsters want to use as their fusion materials. So it kind of fills a dual purpose there. And polymerization is nice because it can use cards on your hand and your field as your fusion materials, which means your face down flip effect monsters can still be used for a fusion summon. They can't be linked with, they can't be used as a synchro summon, but you can use a face down monster as a fusion material summon, which is kind of why I wanted to take advantage of polymerization as well as the numeral the several Shaddoll cards in our deck. On our turn here, we've managed to really effectively stop our opponent because he had nothing but defensive cards in his hand, along with that 1 magical meltdown. And that's kind of the one thing with the Invoked engine, is that its combos are very linear. You have to draw multiple cards if your opponent negates you, or while you're trying to go from Terraforming, Meltdown into Meltdown, Meltdown into Alistar, Alistar into Invocation. If your opponent stops you along the way, you kind of are stuck at that point. It isn't terribly bad, and a lot of other decks do the same thing, but polymerization can be searched out in different ways with different cards rather than just following the same pattern over again. We just flipped over Shaddoll Falco. Shaddoll Falco has a graveyard effect where it tries to summon a monster from the graveyard to the field, but my opponent negated it with Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, and so we're not going to be able to do too much this turn. But what I am going to do is probably do some damage and poke my opponent for a little bit, because we only have 1 monster, and we have loads of fusion spells, but just 1 monster. I activate Fusion Recycling Plant, a really nice field spell for this deck. This card, once per turn, can let you discard a card to add a polymerization from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So it's really good at, like it says in its name, recycling your resources. And also, it has another effect, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But for now, I just discarded Fusion Substitute in order to search out Polymerization. Fusion Substitute is a really cool card. Fusion Substitute, kind of like how Harpies have the name Harpy Lady in them. And Harpy Lady 1, 2, and 3 are considered Harpy Lady at all time. Fusion Substitute is also polymerization for all effects and purposes in the game's mechanics. So any effect that says search out polymerization, you can search out Fusion Substitute. And what's nice about Substitute is that it has a graveyard based effect, as well as being able to use to fusion summon monsters on your field. And so discarding it isn't too bad, because we're going to get it back, or we're going to be able to use it to get resources back later on in the game. We've passed over to our opponent here. Let's see what he can do. He's more than likely playing, well, he's playing Invoked. We know that much already. So he's probably going to be playing, well, most people that play Invoked and Legacy Duelist are playing Mech Knight Invoked, and it is a very, very powerful deck. Very, very strong. I think it's one of the best decks in the game, in my opinion, personally. But let's see if he can do anything at this point. So while we're here, I want to kind of talk about my situation right now. Not my personal situation, but the situation on the field. This is the problem with the Shaddoll deck, is you brick quite a lot. Because you need to get the right combo of cards out, you need to have a fusion spell and 2 Shaddoll monsters in order to do any kind of plays. You can brick quite easily. And what's also worse is the Shaddoll monsters and the Shaddoll spell and trap cards technically aren't searchable, really. There are extenders that can extend their plays further, but there are no starters for the Shaddoll archetype. And so, yeah, it's a hard deck to work with. I haven't been able to figure out like the right ratio of how many fusion spells you need to have compared to how many monsters that you want to have. I know it's quite a lot, and because it's quite a lot, it's like greater than 20 cards in your deck. I felt like I had to go above 40 in order to just have options in our deck, and to add some starters like the Elemental Hero engine, so that we could search out a fusion spell. Otherwise, we're just trying to draw it the old-fashioned way, and that's not really that good. Activate El Shaddoll Fusion. El Shaddoll Fusion is a quick play spell, which is really, really nice. It's kind of like Marsh Change in a way, where a lot of the ways that you like to do it is attack your opponent with cards, and then during the battle phase, use it to summon out a monster. So just like I'm doing now, I'm summoning out El Shaddoll Winder by sending Dragon and Falco to the graveyard. And when those cards are hit the graveyard, they're also going to give me effects too. So this is what's nice about Shaddolls. While they're kind of clunky in getting started, when you make a fusion summon, they kind of pay you back in advantage for using them as materials. So Dragon is actually going to now destroy a card on my opponent's field, a spell or trap card that is, and he's going to activate Infinite Impermanence to negate Winder. That does nothing really to me right now, but he's probably doing it so that he can also negate the column, and he's also about to be destroyed, so why not activate it? Is no real point. It also does tell me, however, that he doesn't have another Infinite Impermanence, so if he had multiple copies of it, he might have saved it for an actual good time, because negating Winder does nothing right now. And Falco is just and Falco revives itself to the field when it's sent as a material, so it just summons itself, gives you a monster you can keep on summoning with. We're going to attack directly with for 2200 attack now, and we're in a very comfortable position. One of the best cards in this deck is Elemental Hero, El Shaddoll Winder. El Shaddoll Winder is a level 5, it only has 2200 attack, but it cannot be destroyed by card effects, and it says that while this card is face up on the field, each player can only special summon once per turn, which is really, really cool, or one more time per turn, not once per turn. Which is really, really cool, because you can set up your board, summon Winder, and a lot of decks struggle to out her. Not all decks, of course. Some decks will just get rid of her quite easily. They'll just like Kaiju over it or Mech Knight over it. Doesn't really matter. But a lot of decks really need to rely on their special summons in order to get started, including this one. During the end phase, by the way, what you just saw was Fusion Recycling Plant's second effect. Fusion Recycling Plant's effect is that while it's on the field, if you've done a fusion summon, in the end phase you can add back one of those cards. And there are some really cool interactions that you could do with that, because you can get cards like Armageddon Knight or Dark Refer back to your hand, because you can use them as fusion materials. It doesn't matter if it's a Shaddoll card or not. As long as it was used as a fusion material, you can get that card back to your hand. My opponent plays Mind Control, a card that's really good at dealing with Winder, and I don't really want him to take it because he might try to link climb with it. So we're going to play another copy of El Shaddoll Fusion, and we're going to respond to that effect by summoning out another Winder, getting rid of that Winder, and also sending to the graveyard Falco, or should we send Dragon? Dragon can destroy that face down card. I'm not really too worried about that though. But yeah, we might as well get rid of that and keep Falco in the field, because Falco can give us a summon later on if my opponent finds a way to summon that monster. Which he probably won't, because we knew what was in his hand before, and he's only just drawn Mind Control, so this is fine. This is pretty good. So El Shaddoll Winder is going to be resummoned to the field. Winder's effect to restrict you to how many summons counts only after she's hit the field. So if you summon one and then you are hit by it, but then you summon another one, you could then summon another monster out, so keep that in mind. Also, El Shaddoll Winder has a graveyard based effect. Like all El Shaddoll cards, it can add back a Shaddoll spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. And Shaddoll Dragon is now going to pop that final card on his field. So it's all about recycling your resources and maintaining your card advantage by actually going through the effect of doing a fusion summon. That being said, there are, as I said, there are still some issues with this deck. It needs its starter plays, and yeah, it makes the deck a really, really clunky. I think I'm kind of close to finding a sweet spot for this deck. I think I calculated that it needs to be like 58 cards, but I'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's a very, very slow fusion-based deck. I personally think if you're gonna want to play a fusion-based deck, I would definitely go for either Heroes. Heroes are very flexible now, and Invoked are one of the best engines in the game for fusion-based summoning. But the real reason why those decks are so good is because they circumvent the need to use free cards in your control to fusion summon with. Alistair can use cards from either player's graveyard for his fusion summon, and Heroes, they just extend, and they actually have good starter cards as well. So over to my opponent, he set one monster and passed, and then went back to me. I just drew into instant fusion, which is nice. Always nice to have that card. But at this point, I think, you know, we're in game winning position. He's only got 2 cards on the field. I don't think he's going to be able to really stop us that much. So I can only special summon one more card per turn, so I've got to be careful. Do I want to go for a fusion summon? Do I want to go for something else? I don't want to use... I would normally just do instant fusion, summon Thousand Eyes Restrict, take his monster, and then link it with Link Karibo, but because I can only special summon once, it might not be worth doing that. I'm going to use the graveyard effect of Fusion Substitute. So I'll banish it from the graveyard. I'm going to return the Winder that I used earlier on, so I can put it back in my deck and use it again. And then we're going to get to draw 1 card. And we got Squamata, which is always really good to have. Really, really good card to use for fusion summoning, because it has a Foolish Burial style effect. So it triggers all of your other effects quite nicely immediately. So Squamata is pretty good. I like playing him at 3. So we just returned Winder. We're going to summon out another copy of Winder out to the field, which is nice. Both of them can't be destroyed by card effects, so I'm not really too worried about the back row. And we're also going to trigger the effect of Dragon and Squamata simultaneously. Now, this is speaking of simultaneous effects, that's another downside to playing Shaddolls in this. They very, very much like to do what's called Segoc. S-E-G-O-C. And Segoc in Yu-Gi-Oh! Stands for Simultaneous Effects Go On Chain. It is the ability to choose the order of your effects when 2 effects that are mandatory activate at the same time. So just now, Dragon and I think it was Beast I sent, both activated at the same time. If I wanted to, if I was worried about my opponent having a negation, what I should have been allowed to do is choose which one goes first and which one goes second. This is called chain blocking. Chain blocking is ordering your chain in a way where your opponent can only respond to the last card on the chain. So my opponent just used Solemn Strike on one of my cards, but if I swap them around, he would only be able to negate the one I didn't care about losing. So that's kind of what it is. But it doesn't matter. We've won the deck. Here is a glimpse at the 60 card deck. That was a very quick glimpse. I'm really sorry about that. Again, I'm not happy with the build yet. I am still working on it, so I will get that to you guys once I've got it. But yeah, Shaddoll's very, very hard to work with. Guys, as always, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon. Take care.